How on earth does a microscopic fungus turn a complex ant into a biologically programmed puppet? I mean, it sounds straight out of science fiction, doesn't it? But this isn't some chaotic zombie movie. It's a cold, calculated mechanical reality. We're going to trace exactly how a nearly invisible spore can completely hijack the nervous system and the body of a highly complex insect, stripping away its free will and turning it into a machine with a singular, deadly purpose.
Okay, let's dive into this. We need to start with a foundational concept called the extended phenotype. In evolutionary biology, this is a fascinating scenario where a parasite's genome exerts absolute control over the physical body of its host. The parasite doesn't just, live inside the host. It literally transforms the host into a mechanical platform to complete its own life cycle. In our explainer today, the victim is the Camponotus carpenter ant. The Ophiocordyceps fungus turns this ant into a literal vehicle, completely puppeteering its biology for the fungus's own survival.
Phase 1 of our thriller, breaching the host.
Every nightmare has a beginning, right? For the carpenter ant, it starts completely unnoticed. A single microscopic spore called a basidiospore lands on its outer shell or cuticle. And this triggers a highly mechanical invasion process. The spore doesn't just wait around for the ant to breathe it in. First, we have the enzymatic attack. The spore secretes this incredible, highly potent mixture of chitinase and protease enzymes. This chemical cocktail literally melts through the tough outer armor of protein and chitin that makes up the ant's exoskeleton. Once that armor is breached, step 2 kicks in: mechanical penetration. The spore develops a penetration peg, called an aprosorium, that physically pierces straight into the ant's open body cavity, the hemocoil. Just like that, the breach is complete.
Phase 2, hijacking the muscles.
So the breach is complete, but get this, the ant doesn't actually act strangely right away. We enter this really tense incubation period where the fungus operates in absolute stealth mode. Walking through the timeline here, day 1, the spore lands and breaches. But by days 3 to 7, the fungus reproduces as single yeast-like cells that just float freely within the ant's circulatory fluid, the hemolymph. During this phase, it's actively disguising itself, totally evading the host's immune system while quietly feeding on non-essential nutrients. Then, in week 2, a horrifying shift happens. Once it hits a critical density, those individual floating cells harden, elongate, and fuse together. They construct a massive, three-dimensional structural network of threads called hyphae, spreading throughout the ant's entire body.
Now, what's really interesting about this phase is how it completely shatters the myth we've all come to believe. The myth says the fungus eats and controls the brain to turn the ant into a zombie, right? Well, actually, scratch that. The reality revealed by 3D electron microscopy is vastly more sinister. The fungus leaves the neural tissue of the brain completely intact. Instead, these hyphae networks proliferate throughout the muscle tissues in the thorax, the abdomen, and the legs. It wraps around the muscle fibers like a 3D net and secretes neurotransmitter-like compounds. It is physically puppeteering the ant's limbs directly, leaving the ant as an imprisoned, fully aware spectator in its own body.
Phase 3, the death march. At this point, the internal fungal network is fully established. It starts secreting these complex chemical compounds that actually alter the ant's sensory organs. Driven entirely by the parasite, the ant does the unthinkable. It severs its social link to the colony. It abandons the safety of the colony's pheromone trails high up in the forest canopy, we're talking over 20 meters up, and begins this erratic, stumbling descent down the tree trunks. The fungus is driving the ant totally against its own survival instincts down toward the understory vegetation to seek out a highly specific microclimate.
And when I say specific, I mean absolutely astonishing biological targeting. The ant is steered exactly 20 to 25 centimeters above the ground. Not just anywhere, but specifically to the underside of a north-facing leaf. So the crucial point is why it chooses this exact height and orientation. Well, being exactly 20 to 25 centimeters off the ground on the underside of a north-facing leaf guarantees a constant relative humidity of 90 to 95% and temperatures perfectly locked between 20 and 30 degrees Celsius. These are these strict, absolute optimal conditions required for the parasite growing inside to thrive. The ant has simply been used as a transportation vehicle to deliver the fungus to its perfect nursery. All right, once the ant is positioned on the main vein of that leaf, the final act for the host begins.
At around 12 p.m., solar noon, driven precisely by circadian rhythms, the fungus triggers a maximum chemical contraction in the ant's jaw muscles. It forces the ant to clamp down in what's known as the death grip. And here's the crazy part. Following this bite, the fungus literally destroys the muscular cellular connections in the jaw. This creates a permanent mandibular lock on the leaf tissue. There is no way out. The ant can never let go.
Phase 4, mummification and eruption. The motor phase is officially over. The ant dies within hours as the fungus consumes its remaining organs, kicking off this mechanical, step-by-step mummification process. And this brilliantly illustrates the fungus's control. Step 1, it secretes potent antimicrobial and antibiotic compounds to preserve the carcass and fight off opportunistic bacteria. Step 2, after a couple of days, fungal hyphae grow right out through the ant's feet, effectively gluing the body to the leaf so it won't fall. Step 3 is the horrifying eruption. A long, rigid fruiting body called a stroma ruptures straight through the soft membrane behind the ant's head. Finally, step 4. After a week or two, a spherical structure at the tip called the ascoma bursts under hydraulic pressure, raining deadly spores down on the forest floor below. There's a quote from the source material that really hits the nail on the head. Infecting more ants, releasing more spores, infecting more ants. It captures the relentless, escalating mathematical horror of this organism perfectly. Slime molds and fungi race to decompose matter, and many spread by releasing spores, sometimes up to 30,000 a second. If just one of these spores lands in the right place on an unsuspecting foraging ant below, the entire cycle starts again. This relentless rain of microscopic terror can literally wipe out entire ant colonies.
Phase 5, nature fights back. But hey, the story isn't entirely one-sided. The ant colonies aren't just sitting ducks against this microscopic monster. The ants have evolved their own highly calculated defenses, known as social immunity, to save their colonies from total annihilation. The first strategy is spatial isolation. The ants deliberately nest high up in the canopy layer, above 20 meters, specifically to minimize contact with that humid, spore-laden understory where the fungus thrives. The second is quarantine intervention. If healthy worker ants detect a colony member displaying early signs of motor incoordination or fungal contamination, they don't wait around. They will physically drag the infected ant far, far away from the colony before it can ever reach that dangerous final bite phase. They literally enforce a physical quarantine. But to put the sheer scale of this parasite into perspective, 600. We aren't just talking about one isolated nightmare limited to a single species of ant here. There are over 600 species of Cordyceps spread across the world, primarily in jungles, preying on a whole host of different insect victims, each one beautifully and terrifyingly adapted to perfectly puppet its specific host. Which leaves us with a pretty chilling final thought. If a microscopic spore can puppet a complex insect with such precise mechanical terror, hijacking its muscles, directing its movements, and utilizing its body as a biological factory, what other invisible puppet masters are hiding in the jungle? The natural world is full of perfectly calibrated machinery, and sometimes, the most terrifying monsters aren't the chaotic zombies of fiction. They're the silent, calculating forces right beneath our feet.